This is for the love in you. Oh, this is for the love in you.
Peace and light. This is your self-love advocate, Pierre, and we are on another episode of the Love Right Now show. And I'm with my tribe sis, Rozella White, Minister Rozella White.
Oh, gosh.
Somebody that I absolutely admire so much, and your story, your journey, your services all empower me. And so thank you for being on the Love Right Now show today. As I start every show, I like to recognize a person or group of people who are self-love slaying in these streets. And that would be you.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. I love that self-love slaying.
Self-love slaying in these streets, okay? And we are talking about the state of Black women's health, as well as part of a series, Healing the Black Woman.
Yes.
And we'll get into a little bit of your personal journey and how you arrived at where you are today, and how we can also stay in touch with you as well. So,
sounds great.
So let's just dive right on in. Tell us about your services, what you do. Who is Rozella White?
Yes, well, my name is Rozella. I go by Rozella Haydée White. Haydée is my middle name, and my first and my middle name are directly from my grandmothers. So my dad's mom's name is Rozella, and then my mom's mom's name was Haydée Gisela. And so I'm Rozella Haydée, and that's always important for me because I literally am a reflection of and carry the names of the women in my life, and my grandmothers in particular. So I use my whole name. I generally tend to use my whole name. And right now I have started a business. It's actually called Restoring Hearts to Wholeness. But there are different aspects of that, and one in particular is RHW Consulting, where I provide spiritual life coaching, leadership consulting, writing and inspirational speaking services for a variety of folks, but mainly for women.
Yeah.
My passion is working with women, and women specifically in transition, whether it be young adult women who are going from this is what I thought I knew life to be, and now I'm experiencing life in this next chapter, to older women who are either empty nesters or who have experienced loss in their life. My kind of ideal client or person is that woman who is in transition, who is seeking to live life a little differently and ultimately to experience restoration of their heart, of their body, of their soul, and of their mind. So that's what I do.
And I love what you do. It's amazing.
Thank you.
What is the demographics of the women that you primarily serve?
Yeah, I actually serve a fairly diverse demographic, both racially and age-wise.
Okay.
So it tends to fall into kind of a few categories. Generally younger adult women, so people that are probably early 20s, early 30s, and then older women. I'm dealing with a lot of women. I have a few clients that are mid to late 40s, early 50s, and are looking to redefine their life. Like they have lived a certain way for so long, and for whatever reason, whether it be heartbreak, whether it be change of job, or just a different season, they feel like they want to embrace a new way of living moving forward. So age-wise, it tends to be my demographic. And in terms of clientele with women, I mean, I have clients of all backgrounds, ethnicities. And that's a gift that I feel like I bring. I'm someone who moves in diverse circles. I really value diversity, not for diversity's sake, but because one of my core beliefs is that we experience who God is and the creative power of God through the relationships that we have with people. So if all of my relationships are just reflective of one thing, then that limits how I understand and also how I experience God. So I've always been someone that has had very diverse relationships, and my clientele is now reflecting that value.
Love it. And you travel a lot, right?
Yes.
So your clients are like here, they're all over the world.
Yeah, my clients are all over the world.
Wow.
And the beauty in both my coaching services and consulting services is that I'm able to utilize technology, particularly for coaching, and then consulting, I go wherever the client is. And so I do have clients now literally all over the world. And
That's awesome.
exciting.
That's very exciting. And we're going to Tobago.
Yes, I'm so
here.
excited. I've never been to Trinidad and Tobago, so this is I'm excited about that as well.
Yay.
And that's my vacation for this quarter.
And she deserves a vacation, okay? So I'm just going to ask you, how do you feel about the state of Black women's health today?
There is so much that we as Black women carry in our bodies. And I am so cognizant of the reality that we tend to literally live a broken-hearted existence. And on the one hand, we think about that emotionally, right? Like, I have a broken heart because of a failed romantic relationship. But I don't think about broken heart from just that vantage point. I think about that from the disappointments of life, of having to either be someone that we really truly aren't to please others, having to carry the mantle. And I know we have talked about, and you have talked about, like, kind of the fallacy of the strong Black woman and how that actually can do more harm for us than good. And so our hearts are broken, and I think it actually tends to be tied to the largest disease that we suffer from, which is heart disease.
Absolutely.
Right? And so there is something about the heart that I'm really interested in, not just from a biological standpoint, but from an emotional and spiritual standpoint. And so I think one of our biggest issues that we're facing is just brokenheartedness, right? I am someone who is 37, who is divorced, and I have a lot of sisters who look like me, who are professional, who are educated, who are well-traveled, and who are also single. And then I think about those of us who are trying to create life on our own terms as well, and that just requires a certain amount of resilience. But a lot of times we get tired. And we don't actually, we're not able to stop and just be and really just feel. You know, for so long I feel like self-love or self-reflection was a privilege until we recognize that it's not just about the pampering of things, it's about actually loving yourself first. And that's another core belief that I live by, right? I am a person of the Christian persuasion, and we talk about the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with essentially your whole being, and the second is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. For so many of us, we take that as yourself and we let it go. And what I talk about is, no, we have to love God if that's what we believe, and we have to love ourselves, and then we can better love others. And so switching that order and thinking about that as a spiritual practice is really important for me.
Love it. Love it. And we need that. And I love how you said that we're kind of existing with brokenheartedness. Wow. Because, I mean, that resonated with me so well. Because I think about how a broken heart can affect how you move forward. Period. Especially when you didn't really get the support that you needed to deal with that, right? So as we talk about self-love and self-care, who was the first person that taught you how to take care of yourself as a woman?
It's interesting because it sounds a bit cliche, but I do think of my mother, and not from a pampering standpoint, or not from even a taking time to really attend to my inner life, as much as my mother was the first woman to teach me that you do what you think is best for you, right? And I saw her do that throughout my childhood, and even as she is now retired. My mother's social calendar is like busier than all of our social calendars put together, right? Like my business calendar is really busy, but my mom still is very much committed to doing the things that she enjoys. She's unapologetic in that. And she really is a woman that knows what she likes and what she wants to do. So in some respects, that was my first lesson, right? To be a woman who took care of herself was to be very clear about what she wanted and to go after it, right? And to do so without apology, which again is something that many of us are always doing. We're apologizing for everything. We apologize for simply existing. And my mother did not get that lesson. So she was very much, this is what I do. And it's good, except when you're raised by that.
That applied to you too. Okay.
My mother was very much like, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. But I would say, honestly, I don't think that I came to know the importance of self-love and self-care until probably I was going through my divorce. I had just moved to Philadelphia and was a grad student at a seminary, was working on my master's in religion, and my marriage was never great. And you know, we often say that happy marriages don't end in divorce, and so It wasn't the best relationship, and I had started therapy at that time.
Okay.
And so I was going through therapy, and I had this incredible woman therapist, a Jewish woman therapist in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I worked with her for 3 years. She was incredible. And she had a way of weaving together spirituality and self-love and care in a way that I hadn't experienced before. So from a psychological standpoint, I was experiencing this is what it means to listen to yourself, to feel. I use the this phrase all the time, feel all the feels, pay attention to what you're feeling. But then also when I was in seminary, I was going through courses and learning about concepts related to the divine feminine, concepts related to Black women and the way Black women understand and relate to God. Oh yeah. Yeah, so there's a whole theological understanding that we term womanist theology that departs from Alice Walker and her definition of womanist or womanish. But from a theological standpoint, we say that we understand who God is as Black women through our lived experience, not only as it relates to the spiritual, but the actual. Right?
Okay.
So as a Black woman in this culture, in this context, we have some really, we have some experiences of suffering, of trauma, of heartache, but we also have experiences of joy and resilience and hope, unlike any other population. And so that framework, along with, having a therapist that was pushing me to spend the time to listen to myself and to not apologize for taking time, led me to take self-care seriously and led me to fall in love or to start the process of falling in love with myself.
Right.
I think that would continue until, 4 years later when my divorce became official and some other things changed in my life. But those were definitely formative experiences that got me to understand self-love and self-care in a more holistic sense, that it wasn't just one-dimensional. It included my whole being, my mind, my heart, my body, and my soul.
In seminary, as an adult, shaped your experience and definition of self-love and self-care.
Yeah, and it spoiled me.
Yeah. Why would you say it spoiled you?
It spoiled me. Well, I was in a seminary that I just had access to women professors and theologians that thought like that. And it's a bubble. It was a bubble, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we find in ministerial places, particularly as women in ministry. That's not the norm out in our society. And so then it's a constant battle to say this way of thinking or being or feeling is valid, right? Is a valid expression and representation of how I understand faith and spirituality and my connection to God, that God actually commands for me to care for myself, because by doing so, I then nurture the divine within. Right? And that is, most Christian religious orientation in our country really does focus on self-sacrifice. And so this notion of leaning into self-love and to say, no, we're going to love ourselves, we're going to love God and ourselves before we love neighbor, is almost seen as heretical.
Yeah, because I was taught God first, other second, me last.
And how am I able to
And I was taught that in church.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody's taught that.
Yeah.
Everybody's taught that. So to be exposed to another way of thinking and to resonate with it and to discern it, right? It's not like we just take everything in and don't critique and think through what it is. But that deeply resonated with me. You can't give from an empty vessel.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift. And now you give that gift to others.
Yeah, I try. I definitely try.
So, what would you say is, when we've talked before, we've talked about relational and how that part is the part when it comes to caring in general. What would you say is the largest impact on the relationship between Black women and healthcare providers?
The largest relationship or the
largest impact?
The largest impact of a relationship. I mean, I think on one hand, many of us have had relationships or experiences where what we were bringing, our presenting issues, haven't been taken seriously. And I mean, we also have to deal with the history of healthcare and healthcare providers and the Black community, right? So to this day, my grandmother still hates going to the doctor. Because healthcare and medical providers weren't safe spaces for us. I mean, we were from a time and from a country where who we were was not even humanized. And so to go to someone that didn't consider who we were as human, right, was a problem, and a lot of times brought about death in our communities.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it was experimentation or the taking of literally people's genetic codes and DNA to do things with. So we have already like ingrained in us an unhealthy relationship with the medical community, and not because of us, right? Because of what was done to us.
Yeah.
And I think Black women, though, at least as I have grown into adulthood, I've seen us take very seriously our health, right? There are, I feel like, more medical providers who are women of color or people of color that are providing services to us. There's definitely, the work you do around holistic care and wellness, right? Like, I just feel like there is at least a more positive move for us and the medical community.
And I feel that too. I feel that too, definitely. And I feel like there's this, there's kind of two sides of the conversation, you know, and it's like, with all good intentions, I see a side that is trained medically and they want to get to the solution, but they want to get to the solution fast.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not taken seriously when there needs to be a pause and redirect.
Yes.
And unfortunately, sometimes that may work out well, but there have been many times, in the cases of childbirth, too many times, where that has led to more serious ailments and even death.
Right.
You know.
Right. And it boggles my mind to be a country as advanced as we are, right, scientifically, that Black women's maternal mortality rates, are so high that even people who have access, I mean, the most recent was hearing Serena's story about what she experienced, you know, even people who have access to all the resources still suffer and are not taken seriously. And I think sometimes it's because of tropes, like because of ways of thinking and being that people still hold. I was a hospital chaplain for a year and a half. And working in hospitals was such a gift and actually helped me be very clear about my call to walk alongside people, because you can't do anything as a chaplain. You can't fix someone. You can't, I mean, you're not there to convert. It's not about growing a church. It's really about journeying with people through life circumstances, right? And for those who are open to it, helping them make sense, even though some situations are nonsensical, right? There's no way to make sense of a baby dying when you go in to have a baby and then the baby's dead. Like, you come out without a child. There's no way of making sense of that. So my role as a chaplain was just to walk alongside people, right? To just be present. But I would always hear stories, especially of Black women, of saying that they either weren't believed or that I could see doctors not providing the same level of care to people that look like us, right? Because we're stronger, right? So we don't need as much drugs or as many drugs, or we have a higher pain tolerance. And none of that is factually proven.
Exactly.
It's not fact, right? It's just things that have been carried on throughout history. And so,
and it mirrors this strong woman that we feel many times that we have to be. And so it's something that we put on ourselves because of our conditioning, how we're raised, how people look at us. And we hold ourselves to that expectation of being this strong person. And then on the other end, there are some people who put it on us. And literally, it just boggles my mind that we are subjected to some of these things that are killing many of us.
Literally. I know women that go into the hospital or have surgery or are doing things, right? And you should have a recovery time. And they're still taking phone calls, they're still answering emails, we're still working. And I used to be like that, right? Like, I used to be that person that was like, I gotta keep going. And a few years ago, I decided no. Like, I don't think God calls me to live like that, right? And then to actually not take the time to rest, then we get into a place where I think that we have to be worried about, because now we're saying we know better than God. Right? For those of us that that do believe in that, and I work with all sorts of people, but for those of us that believe in a higher power, and we believe a story of God creating and God taking rest, when we don't rest, we actually have a God complex, because now we're saying that we know better than God, and that we can operate in ways that even God herself did not operate. And so for me, it becomes a theological issue, right? Like, self-care and self-love is about taking care of myself and about resting, because in rest comes renewal, in rest comes clarity, in rest comes energy to actually do the things that you're called to do, right?
Because we can't do anything if we're empty.
No. And we can't do anything if we're dead.
Yeah, we can't do nothing.
I mean, you can be someone's guardian angel.
Right. But not in this physical life.
On this
Your
realm.
work is over. I remember a girlfriend of mine who was younger than me a few years ago who was fighting cancer, and she eventually passed away.
I'm sorry.
But I remember it was pretty sad. And I remember being in the hospital with her on a visit, and she had her own business, and she was literally, while she's in the hospital fighting for her life, still running her business.
Yeah.
And that was just like, wow. You know what I mean? And for me, just feeling completely helpless, because this is what she's choosing to do with the time that she has, And I could relate to that. And I was thinking, damn, I might be doing something like that, as I'm on my own self-love journey, you want to get these things done, but we need to be encouraging others more to pause and give ourselves grace and take better care of ourselves. People really need to understand that this is, a life decision.
Yeah, it is. It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
Right. We talk about how we eat and the quality of relationships, but I think we also have to take the time to reflect and deconstruct whatever tapes are playing in our head, right? So whatever that thing is that tells you that you can't stop, right? That you can't take the time to rest, that you can't take time off. Because I really believe that a lot of those things are lies, right? I mean, very few of us, and I have to tell this a lot to my colleagues in ministry, we are not doing brain surgery, right? I don't need to be on call 24/7.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm literally, someone's life is not literally in my hands, right? So then now I have to take a step back to think about the importance that I place on this work, right? And is it actually reflective of the actual nature of the work?
Yeah.
And I'm someone who works hard. I enjoy my work. Like, I probably work more than other people, or people look at me and think I'm a workaholic. But everything that I do, there is an ebb and flow, and there's always this time of rest, right? So I vacation quarterly. That's important to me, right? To make sure that I take time each quarter away. And I mean full on away. So when we go, I ain't answering no phone. I'm away.
You are away.
Because I gotta stop, right? So we have to, what are those things in our minds and in our hearts and in our bodies that say that we can't do that? And then we've got to actually form new thoughts, right? Because as long as our thoughts remain one thing, our behavior is not going to change. And so part of this, yes, and if you want to behave differently, sometimes we've got to address what we believe.
And reshaping our truth.
Yes, reshaping our truth.
Taking on other people's ideas of who we are and what we should do and why we should do it and all of that.
Yes.
It's so important. So important. So I think about before I reshaped my truth and where I was, and I was really, really, really at a state of confusion, and insecurity. So for someone that is still believing all of that junk about themselves and needs to decode, as you put it, but really doesn't know how to get started, what advice would you give her?
Well, the first thing I always tell people is that your feelings are valid, right? They may not be true, but they're valid. And I think sometimes we beat ourselves up for feeling whatever it is we're feeling. So we have to first actually stop and feel the feels, become aware of what's happening in our bodies. Our bodies tell us so much about what we're thinking and all of that, and how we're feeling. And so I think once we are able to actually articulate, I'm feeling this way, then we get to interrogate it, right? And this all takes work, and it takes practice, and it takes awareness. So, if I have a thought, or if there is something that is telling me that I have to be this kind of woman, then I have to say, well, how do I feel when I'm being that kind of woman, right? Because on the one hand, you could feel really good, right? Whatever that prototype or that image of woman that you feel like you have to be, on the one hand, you could feel like great about it. On the other hand, when you stop and feel and think about it, you could be like, I don't actually feel like my fullest self, right? Like when I feel like I have to show up in these ways, I'm not necessarily feeling like my most authentic self. And even that takes practice to recognize, right? To know when I'm this is like, I'm in my skin and I'm in my body. For me, I know when those experiences happen, when thoughts are suspended, when I'm not judging myself, when I'm actually experiencing joy, when there tends to be meaningful experiences that are happening and good conversations, good connections, I know then that I'm being my most authentic self, right? And I'm not second guessing what I said, what I did. And this is also true of relationships and friendships. When I'm able to be my most authentic self, I'm just being, right? I'm not thinking of how to be, I'm just being. And so part of it is coming into touch with your feelings, with your thoughts, interrogating them, asking yourself, is this the most authentic version of myself? And then you get to actually have some fun in practice, right? So if this way of being was not authentic to you, what are some ways of being that might be authentic to you? And the only way we know that is if we practice it and we embody it. So again, it takes time, right? Like I, for so long, felt like because of my profession, I had to be extroverted. Like I thought that was what, and also our society prides extroversion over introversion. So like I thought that I had to be outgoing. I thought I had to be a morning person. And the reality is I'm neither a morning person nor an extrovert, right? I am someone who does not want to do a meeting before 10 a.m. And now I can do that, right? And I'm also someone who really needs time away from people and from crowds. So that looks like when I'm speaking or when I'm in spaces to ask for what I need, because I know that about myself. It's really hard to ask for what you need when you haven't, when you don't know it. When you don't know it.
So it really all starts with the steps. You know, we talk about this in getting to know who you are. Outside of your conditioning. You know, outside of influences from outside of yourself. But to the core of who you are, what are your desires, what do you want?
I mean, the work is to lay yourself out, like to literally take a step back and look at your life. Look at who you are. Ask yourself what you value. And we always know what we value based on how we spend our time and our resources. And then we could say, based on how I spend my time and my resources, is this what I want to value? And if not, then you can change it. That's the beauty of all of this.
It's your choice.
It's all your choice.
Creating this thing.
And again, as someone who believes in God, as someone who believes in a particular story of God, we are co-creators. And we have been given the gift to constantly create and recreate. So there's nothing that has to be stagnant. You can change. You can always change course.
Your prerogative.
Yes.
And that's the power that we hold. And that's why our purpose is always protected. So I love that. So you have a story, okay? And thank you in advance for sharing it.
Of course.
And for sharing it with me. But you had a situation where you didn't feel like you were being heard in the healthcare spaces. Tell me about that.
So it started a while back, and it was actually, so I also live with depression and anxiety, and so I had just kind of had a major depressive episode where I had basically taken a 3-month leave of absence from work, and the church that I was serving was extraordinarily supportive and helped me get in to see like some amazing therapists, and I finally got on meds and all of these things that I had not done before. I was just kind of living life and not paying attention to that part of my health. And then I was diagnosed formally and was on a journey towards wellness. But around that time, I also started noticing that my period had changed, right? And I was at the point where I was of childbearing age, but had not had children. I would go on for routine pap smears. And there was really nothing that was showing up, nothing that was being told to me that was odd or weird. But I would be going in, and I knew that something was off, right? I knew that something wasn't right. And when I would tell that to my provider, they would say, well, you know, they would feel, and they'd say, no, you're fine. And I'm like, well, my period has changed, it's heavier. Well, it's probably this, but it'll be okay, right? And I was at a point in my life where I really was not advocating for myself, because it was like I had just gotten through so many other traumatic experiences that it was like, okay, well, they say it's fine, it's fine. Well, another year or so goes by, and I moved from Atlanta to Chicago, and I was like, now there's something definitely wrong, right? Like, it's not just a heavy period. Now it's like, when I get my period, my whole life stops, right? And so a friend recommended that I go to a women's health center in Chicago. And I had seen another gynecologist before then, and it was kind of the same thing, but I went to a specialist, and at that point I said, something's wrong. and I need us to do more testing to figure out what it is.
Okay.
And sure enough, they did it. I had an ultrasound done, and again, it wasn't anything that was overly invasive, but I'm grateful that I had insurance to be able to do that, and they found that I did have fibroid tumors, but I had so many that my uterus was actually turned bulky, and I was like, well, that's nice of you. I have a bulky uterus. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Because that's one more thing that I need to take on.
Right.
But I found out that I had numerous fibroids, and of the three, there are 3 different types, I had 2 of them. And the only options were to either do a hysterectomy or to have a uterine fibroid embolization. And I didn't want to do the hysterectomy, and if I'm honest, I didn't want to do it because the recovery time was too long. But I also wanted something that was less invasive, and I wasn't quite ready to say that I'm just giving up all of my parts in that way. And so I did have the procedure last year, and it's been great. Like, it definitely made a difference. It was a shorter recovery period. The downside is that it does weaken my uterus, so I'm not actually able to bear children. I could get pregnant, but that was something that I dealt with, and I never wanted to have kids, but it was one of those moments that even I took a step back because I was feeling like all sorts of things, right? And like a deep sadness, and I still had to combat, well, are you really a woman if you don't have children, right? And I don't even believe that, right? Like, that line of thinking is not native to who I am, but in that moment when I was told that I wouldn't be able to, or I'd be at a significant risk, the choice was gone. And I was like, do I believe this, right? Do I believe that I'm lacking if I can't do this? And so, being aware of my feelings, recognizing what I was feeling, validating that, and then saying, actually, I don't believe that, right? I know that being a woman is inclusive of so many different things. And this is also not the thing that I feel called to in terms of raising children or bearing children. And so I was able to, like, change the tape, right? To stop it and decode it, right? But that's real. And and that's why I love how you use the journey language, right? Because all of this is a journey.
Yes, it is.
And I think the fallacy is that you learn so much and then you, like, graduate. When the reality is
you get a whole degree in you.
No, like, because at every stage, who I am at 37 was not who I was at 27, was not who I was at 17, and I don't think it's going to be who I am at 47, right? But at least I'm able to pay attention and then know that I'm still moving, and that's the goal, to keep moving.
To keep moving. I love that. And, you know, your story is so important because it mirrors a lot of stories that I'm hearing more and more. And that I went in, I knew something was wrong, it was dismissed for one reason or another, and then you went a whole year experiencing all this discomfort until finally you went to a specialist, and then you were provided with choices. You were able to make the best choice for you.
Absolutely.
So we are going to dive into how we can get in touch with you, in just a minute, and some projects that you have coming up, because you actually just released a book.
It's available for pre-order.
Yes, it is. So we're going to dive into that in just a minute.
Okay.
All right, so your book?
I'm so excited. This has been like the hardest thing ever.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited too. So, really fast, how can we get your book?
Yeah. So my book is available for pre-order on Amazon. The title is Love Big, The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. So Love Big, The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. And right now it is on Amazon, so please pre-order, add it to wish list, send it as gifts, but it's really talking about how we engage in relationships that change us and then ultimately change and heal the world. And I mean, I'll give a disclaimer. I do depart from a particular understanding of God and God in relationship with God's self, but it's not a book that's about, again, evangelizing or proselytizing. It really is a self-love book. And it's about how we first, the most revolutionary relationship we're in is with ourselves. And then when we actually fall in love with ourselves, we're better to fall in love and love other people. And ultimately, we're better to able to love God. And then we all experience healing. So I'm really excited. It will be released in May, officially, like the hardcover edition. And I'm really excited.
I'm excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I know
Thank you
that
very
I
much.
know you, so I know you put a lot of work into it. So I can't wait to dive in myself. So as we are closing our session and our discussion, what advice would you have for any healthcare or wellness providers regarding addressing any biases that they have in their spaces?
I really do believe that relationships are the building block of everything, right? And so I think that if you are a provider, a healthcare or wellness provider, and you are not nurturing relationships with your clientele, then there is going to be gaps in the service that you provide.
Okay.
Because without being in relationship, you really can't know a person.
Yeah.
And so I'm always curious about providers that take the time to get to know a client, and not just by intake form, right? But that actually spend time knowing a person's story, knowing what their fears are, what their concerns are, what their hopes are, and then being able to provide care or wellness services based on who that person is. And then on the flip side of that, I think that wellness and healthcare providers become better providers when they also share their story, right? It's a reciprocal thing. It's not just about me as the patient or client giving you or sharing all of who I am. It's about you as a provider also sharing, because then I'm able to relate with you on a different way. And I think that when their building blocks of relationships are laid, then I think wellness actually is more attainable, because now my guard is down. I'm being more trustworthy or trusting of you by you practicing vulnerability. I'm going to be more vulnerable. You know,
like that. And just taking the extra time, you know, to get to know the person.
Yes.
And like you're saying, I mean, at the end of the day, right now it feels like, not with every office, but it's just like you're waiting, and then you get in, and it's diving right into what's going on, what's wrong with you. But, you know, wanting providers that are going to take that extra few minutes that it takes to just get to know my history, am I stressed, what is my diet like, you know, all of that stuff, because it is a holistic approach. So I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. So how can we get in touch with you on social media, your website?
Yes, well, I love to be in touch with folks. So on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, my handles are my name, Rozella, R-O-Z-E-L-L-A H-W, Rozella H-W. And then on Facebook, my page is Rozella H. White. So it's my whole name, Rozella H. White.
Okay.
But I love to engage, and then my website is my name, RozellaHWhite.com. And there you could sign up for love notes. I send out weekly love notes for folks and resources. And then also you can get more information about my book and other things that are happening. So I'm excited. There's a lot of great things unfolding.
That's awesome. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
It's so empowering and motivating. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For being on the show.
Thank you for doing the show, for providing this space, right? It's not just for us, but for those who listen and partake.
Absolutely. And so I'm looking forward to what's to come from you. I can't wait to go to Tobago with you and share sacred space with you. Thank you so much for listening. This was another episode of the Love Right Now show, as we're doing the Healing the Black Woman series. I have been talking with Rozella White, dropping some jewels to get our self-love slaying on, and talking about some really, really serious issues as we care deeply about our healthcare systems, and we want them to be the best systems for the best outcomes for everybody. So this is your self-love advocate, Pierre Raven, and you've been listening or viewing the Love Right Now show. Peace and light.
This is for the love.